Welcome to ReRoll, your SideQuest Bloodbowl week in review. Week 2 began with a face-off between first and last, the Lurking Lizardmen versus the World Wrestling Gobbos. Goblins are always a wild card, and anything can happen, and it did, just unfortunately not in the Goblins' favour. A deep kick from the Lizards was swiftly capitalised on by their rapid skinks after an early fumble from the Goblins, giving the Lurkers an early lead. After this initial setback, the Goblins needed to take an aggressive approach if they were going to stay in this game. Unfortunately, their setup was immediately countered by a perfect defence, and despite a breakaway down the left field, the Lizards were eventually able to dislodge the ball and counter for the second time in the Goblins' receiving half, putting them at a comfortable 2-0 lead at half-time. In the second half, the Goblins kept up this aggression and saw their opening when a mistake from the Lizards and a lucky quad down enabled the Goblins to steal possession inside the Lizards' half. A chase ensued, but unfortunately nerves got the better of this little gobbo as he stumbled on his laces yards before the touchdown line. After recovering the ball, the Reptiles whisked it away for a comfortable third touchdown and their second win of the season. After a great start for both of these teams, the match was on to find out who was the superior stunty team. The game began with an even number of injuries on both sides, and the fleet-footed Skaven did what they do best and ran the ball in for a relatively quick Underworld touchdown on turn 5. Despite the Ogre Doctor managing to bring back a key player, the Ogres just couldn't quite squeeze out the return touchdown in the first half. With a disappointing amount of injuries by half-time, the Boneheads Ogres wanted to dash those rumours that they were just a bunch of dumb brutes by showing that their ball handling game is just as impressive as their ability to knock heads.
Oh my god! What?
Yes! Come on, Ogre!
What?
With the Ogre showing that they deserved to be the stars, the Ogre cage that formed around the Ogre carrier was an impenetrable fortress, and after a 4-turn stall, they eventually scored in turn 15 to equalise the game. Despite failing the first opportunity to score a second touchdown during the final turn of the first half, the Raditz Rodents went for one last play, and despite Destructo Disc once again performing the perfect pass, it appears catching is not the Underworld's strong suit, as a second failed re-rolled catch ended the game in a 1-1 draw and no clear victor to who is the better stunty team. I don't think anyone would be surprised that the Dwarf-Off game would involve a fair bit of punching. What may or may not be unusual though, was the reason for the fighting. After a quick quip from the Cynical Slayers mocking the name of a Figs Liquor player, an all-out drunken brawl ensued about which was the best brand of ale. A discussion that lasted for the entirety of the match. Chaos ensued as drunken fisticuffs erupted all throughout the stadium, with steins thrown and dwarves tossed off the stands. It was truly a sight to behold. When the ref blew for half-time, the brawling just simply moved to the changing rooms. In the second half, but slowly it was becoming clear that the Lickers were coming out on top. After a very heated argument between the Whiskey Twins about which was better, ale or mead, the two runners stormed off in a huff in opposite directions in typical sibling fashion. To the shock of everyone, especially Whiskey himself, he'd ended up in the touchdown zone with the ball stuffed under his shirt, and no one quite knows how it got there. Regardless, a touchdown's a touchdown, and when the baffled ref blew for full time, Figs Lickers had won 1-0. Though we're still not sure anyone heard the ref, as the stadium-wide brawl is still going on today, much to the delight of the Bloodwiser sponsors, as they have announced they have broken the record for the most alcohol sold and consumed in a single match, by over doubling the previous record of 37,000 gallons. Enough talking about dwarves, so let's talk about dwarves. Chaos Dwarves, in fact. Both the Orcs and Chaos Dwarves in our 5th game were looking to get a few more points on the board after a disappointing week 1. With both sides sporting knuckle dusters and dirty tactics, we were all hoping for this to be a brutal game. Unfortunately for the Yuletide lads, Nuffle had decided that today was not their day. Despite an early break from the Chaos Dwarfs Bull Centaur, their attempted stall initially backfired after the Orcs managed to not only blitz the ball carrier, but were more than happy to let their troll beat the snot out of all of their other players, resulting in all of the Chaos Dwarfs Hobgoblins being injured by turn 5. The Chaos Dwarfs did eventually recover though to score in turn 7, but they took one hell of a beating in the process. These losses proved to be too great, and only having 7 players on the second half setup meant they couldn't form a cohesive defence, which ultimately resulted in the Orcs scoring on their receive and eventually stealing the ball late in the second half to score once again and to secure their first well-fought victory of the season, and levelling up the troll who left so many of those hobgoblins reeling on the pitch. After the punishing start these two teams had in week 1, with 3 deaths between them, both of these teams were hoping to have a strong recovery match. As always though, Nuffle decided this was not acceptable, and well, I'll let this clip speak for itself. Despite this horrific luck, the Chaos put up a solid defence, holding off the Bretonnians in the first half with some important blitzes. Even with the dice clearly against the Chaos, all was not lost at half time as they were still a man up. Well, beast. The second half was pretty much a continuation of what the first had devolved into, a messy scrap with blitzes and sacks everywhere and the ball changing hands every couple of turns. But alas, the burning of rerolls and a fortunate misplay gave the Bretonnians the opening they needed to hand off the ball and finally score in turn 15, sealing their first victory of the season and levelling up 2 blitzers, whilst the Chaos were left wallowing from the lack of SPP game from these last 2 games. The final game of this week saw the mighty Khemri take on those slippery Kislev. The Kislev looked to make use of their mobility with leaps and superior movement compared to the Khemri, but it seemed that the bash was just too much to handle. After getting their cage caught up in the middle of the field, the Khemri eventually broke down the Kislev's walls and stole the ball from their hairy hands. Even though their passing and handling game left something to be desired, the Khemri eventually scooped up the ball and ran it in for a touchdown at the end of the first half. Having taken the lead, the traditionally slow Khemri were now no longer in a rush, whilst the hot-headed Kislev still had something to prove. With some bold leaps and daring plays, they made a valiant defence, but in the end it just wasn't enough to stop the undead Juggernauts, who eventually scored a second touchdown and securing their place high up on the table. Speaking of the table, let's see how our teams have fared this week. The resulting draw from the stunty match means that neither of these teams were able to claim the top spot, but they still both remain comfortably in the upper half of the table. First wins for the Bretonnians, Orcs and Dwarves have set them up to chase the table leaders, who are arguably the 2 bashiest teams in the league. Some rotten luck, or possibly just lack of sacrifices, have meant both of the Chaosy teams are in the lower half of the table. But not all is lost, as in these early stages, even a single win could potentially shoot them up into the top 4. And that's all from us this week. Be sure to tune in to our Twitch to watch all of Week 3's games live, and follow us on our Twitter to find out exactly when they're going to be played. All of the VODs of the games mentioned this week are on this channel and are linked down below. Finally, if you want to keep up to date, check out our website for the tables, schedules and results. This has been ReRoll, your SideQuest Blood Bowl week in review. Thank you all for watching, and may Nuffle bless you all.
What was his name, sorry?
What, Romeo's wants a grrr?
Yeah,